I am very excited to share the fourth interview in our lightweight rowing podcast series. The final two episodes are going to have a very unique flavor to them as we look at two incredible athletes, male and female, who go from lightweight to heavyweight and vice versa. First, I want to thank my friend Dan Garbutt for first telling me about Peter Antonie and for Drew Ginn for helping me contact and connect with Peter to make this interview happen. Peter Antonie's rowing career spanned 24 years. In that time, he won a world championship in the lightweight men's single in 1986, and in 1992, along with Stephen Hawkins, took the Olympic gold medal in the men's heavyweight double at the Barcelona Olympics. A lightweight athlete who won at the highest level in two weight classes in rowing. Peter Antonie is a legend in the sport of rowing. To quote Martin Cross, who wrote the following, "Antonie was a lightweight who rewrote history as a man who could take on and beat the world's best open-weight rowers. In doing so, he inspired thousands that with determination, it was possible to do anything." One of the things Peter continually impressed me with was how he continued to look for ways to add speed to the boat in every facet of rowing. Not just the physical, but the elements that athletes don't typically think of to fine-tune. Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast, a podcast focused on scientific and real-world expertise on training strategies between your ears, behind the oar handle, on the field and court, and in the strength and conditioning room. I'm your host, Joe DeLeo. I am a strength and conditioning coach, speaker, and lifelong student focused on continuous improvement. Thank you for joining me, and let's roll to today's episode. I am absolutely thrilled and honored to have onto the Leo Training Podcast Peter Antonie, Thomas Keller Award winner, 1992 men's double Olympic champion, and 1986 lightweight men's single world champion. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure to have a chat.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this, and thank you for making time and waking up early on your Monday morning to make this happen.
It's good. Ready to go.
Awesome. So I would love kind of for you to just kick things off, and you had a very successful and long rowing career, and I did some research, and the earliest result or first result I had on worldrowing.com was 1977 in the lightweight men's 4. But even before that, I think it'd be great for you to kind of just share your roots and how you got started with the sport.
Sure. Well, I wasn't particularly good at any sport at all as a kid. And going to high school, I went to Xavier College, and they had a rowing program, which is fantastic, and I wanted to do that. But the rowing master took one look at me, and I was pretty bloody small, and he said, maybe come back next year. But, I begged and got into the lowest crew in the school, the under 15 D crew, and from there it was onwards and upwards, I guess. So managed to have a really good fun time at school, and very luckily when I left school, I joined up with Melbourne University Boat Club, and they were building another big lightweight squad in order to, I suppose, challenge for medals on the world arena again, because that club, Melbourne Uni Boat Club, had a massive history and in world lightweight rowing, and 4 of the guys from Melbourne Uni Boat Club won the world's lightweight 4 in 1974 in Lucerne. So 2 of those guys were rebuilding the squad. 2 others one had gone off to Harvard and one had gone off to Oxford. And so with I think there's about 25 other young fellas vying to get into the squad, I was lucky enough to get picked to row with these 2 other guys, Jeff Rees and Colin Smith, who had been world champions in 1974, and it was a real fast, steep learning curve, I can tell you. But it was a bit of a conveyor belt, and things moved along very quickly. So that by the age I was 18 and selected in the senior A Lighty 4.
Awesome.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, I think you just said 1974, correct?
Well, those guys had won in 74. It was Cam
Okay.
Johnston,
And
Andrew
then,
Mitchell-Moore. Yeah.
okay. And then in 77, you were selected in the lightweight men's four, and you guys ended up taking silver at the World Championships. So tell us about that. Tell us about that regatta, that experience.
Yeah, it was my first season internationally. I'd just turned 19 by the time the Worlds came around. We rode in Munich, and I might say the aim of this crew with the two other chaps who had been world champions and multi-medalists was to win. There was nothing else. It was to win. And so we rode Munich on our first regatta. We won by 3 lengths in quite difficult cross-tail fast conditions. Wow. We beat the reigning world champions, the French, and I thought, well, this is pretty easy. And went off to Copenhagen for the Copenhagen International Regatta because I had some great international regattas on the circuit back in that era. Unfortunately, not so much now. We rode the heavyweight 4. We won that by a foot over a pretty handy crew from Great Britain. And I think we beat a young crew from East Germany. They had a punch on after the race, funnily enough. Internally in the boat, that is, not between the two nations. So we won that. We won that by a foot. And on the Sunday, we rode lighties and won that. And then it was a bit of a training stint in training camp in Germany. Quite some time until the Worlds came around in Amsterdam. And we rode heat, won that by 17 seconds, if I remember. It was a huge win. And had to wait 7 days for the final. And I think we got ourselves well and truly wound up. We had a very, very aggressive style of racing, which was sort of do or die, get out in front and keep going and going and going. So we led at every mark. We probably had a length and a half of clear water, 500 to go. And I just blew up. I blew up. So last 250, I couldn't see, I couldn't think, I couldn't hear, I couldn't move. The boat went across the course and we came in second. And I was gutted, devastated that I'd failed miserably and lost us the gold medal. And the French went on to win, of course. That was their third in a row. So they were a great crew and they knocked us off in the one that counted. So felt pretty bad about that for many, many years. Gave me a lot of motivation, I suppose.
Yeah. Doing my research, one of the things that jumped out immediately was it seems across your entire career that you were competing both in the lightweight and heavyweight or open weight categories, like pretty much from the beginning to towards the end. Was that, intentional, or was that just, seats were available and you were one of the better athletes and slotted into those boats? How did that come about?
Oh, well, we always competed heavyweight at home in Australia and light. Like a lot of lightweights in any nation would do. If you want to win lights, you got to be up the top of the tree in the heavyweight ranks domestically. But no, I didn't compete internationally in heavyweights until 1988. So I rode from 77 through to 87, bar 1 year in lights. Right, so I did Lighty 4 for a couple of years, Lighty 8s which is a massive event, lightweight 8. Very competitive, very tough. The Spanish, the British, all very, very good. The Italians and what have you. I switched to sculling in the early 80s. I did double really badly, really slowly, trying to learn how to scull properly. Back in the sweeps, couple of okay years, couple of medals, but nothing good. Then I decided to focus on the single in 85, having been Australian champion a couple of times. That was going to be my core aim, to try to win the world's lightweight single, which for me was an incredibly tough event with a lot of great athletes, a lot of great history. I could roll them off the names, so that was my real focus, and I just upped the ante in terms of the training work. And managed to start going a lot faster. But no, I still rode lightweight through those 10 years. 85, I went very quickly at home. I was winning by 15 seconds at national champs and stuff like that. But I completely got it wrong going over in my first year in 85 in the single. Ended up coming ninth. Totally wound myself up and went very slowly. But got it sort of right in 86 and won Lucerne, the international regatta. Pretty couple of lengths, really. I was on fire and felt like I'd really got things right. We had the Commonwealth Games that year up in Scotland. I won that by a long way. And then got to race Bjarne Elting, the fantastic, tough, highly credentialed Danish lightweight sculler who was already world champion back in 1983 and 84, and managed to hold off his onslaught over the last 100 metres. And one of the Danes who was running in the 4 or something said to me, a good friend of mine, says to me, he was ahead of you straight after the finish line. I said, yeah, you're dead right, but not at the finish line. It's two 100ths of a second.
Yeah, I found the race on YouTube. I watched it. It was So I'll put that race in the show notes. The last 250 meters was absolutely incredible. Just trading stroke for stroke there. It was just unbelievable. But one question I had, you mentioned in 85, you said you got it wrong. What do you mean you got it wrong? The execution, the preparation? Because it seems like after 85, from that experience, you learned a ton and were able to make some adjustments heading into 86.
Yeah, 85, training program on it was pretty intense. Pretty sort of fair bit of race work in the training prep, and just guess I got a bit wound up about the whole thing. And I think to get the sculling stuff right, you've got to be very, very relaxed and calm mentally, and have everything on deck. And everything needs to be right: the boat, the oars, everything to suit. And so the next year I sort of stayed and trained back in Melbourne where I live. Had a very good boat built that took 2 years, wasn't ready the year before. It was made by a fantastic boat builder in Geelong. So it was a wooden boat, very light. I had a pair of Stamfley oars that I'd sent the designs that I drew personally to Melkberg and at Stamfley, and I got the oars back and they were oversized deliberately, and I carved them down. They were big blades, not asymmetric, but they were a big set of oars. And I'd taken a lot of timber out of them. So I had the boat. We trained with less intensity but more volume. I was just training in everything that was familiar. Just kept doing my weightlifting, ran on the Yarra River. And just by keeping it more in tune with what had worked, managed to carry that over to Europe and in the Lucerne International Regatta. I was absolutely flying. I reckon the gloss came off after a long tour of Europe, but I still managed to hold it all together to get the win, which is for me a great thing because of the amazing competitors in the field.
Absolutely. And so you designed your own oars, and then when you got them, you said you shaved them down because they were too.
Well, we were mucking around with it. The Stamfley oars are fantastic, beautiful timber blades. I just wanted to do a few things to them. I was coached by Rusty Robertson, the great New Zealand coach, who won the 8 in 72. He came to Australia, and Rusty was a carpenter, and he'd always be fine-tuning things, be it boat, be it oars. So having rowed with Rusty, we're familiar with doing some fine adjustments. And in terms of the oars, I just took a lot of volume out of the width of the blade, the thickness of the timber, made the shafts aerofoil shape down near the loom, so that where there's a bit of backwatering, it's not a square back, it's a aerofoil shape. But yeah, took a fair bit of timber out of the lower end of the shaft and the inboard side as well, just to keep the balance in hand right. So yeah, we used to muck around like that. It was good fun.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it sounds like you have left no stone unturned when it comes to trying to increase boat speed.
Well, I think, you got to get it right. I think that because it gets down to very fine percentages. So boat's same. The boat I had was extremely narrow, extremely round, and fit for purpose. It's specially made thin riggers. Should it get rough at Nottingham, which it can, but you got to do these things because I won that race by 2/100ths of a second, which is 4/1000%.
Wow. Yeah.
In time difference at 6 minutes 18 seconds or whatever it was. So yeah, there you go.
I guess part of me should not be surprised as a man that has also worked his career in finance, looking at numbers and making sure you have everything dialed in. It sounds like that aligns very well, kind of with your skill set and your personality. You're looking at everything to get the maximum out of the system as possible.
Well, that was then, and that was when it mattered in terms of my rowing. Now it doesn't matter. I'll still row, but just row. Just get out there and have a bash now. But it's the little bits that you've got to put together. And I was fortunate to be coached, mentored, and trained with some people with great experience who have all gone on and done very well in life because of the diligence and the I suppose coverage of getting all the things right. Now, some years I got it very wrong. My career was up and down, very erratic, particularly through lightweight. It's more consistent as heavyweight.
So, one question I have for you. So, you captured the lightweight men's single world championship in 1986, and I was looking through the results. In '87 at the World Championships, you were in first through, according to the timestamps, through everything, the results through the first 1,500 meters, but ended up finishing fifth in that regatta. So I was just curious what happened in the last 500 in that race.
Oh, I probably think the only reason why I might have been leading was I had the best lane by far. It was viciously unfair conditions at Copenhagen, and I had the good alley. Okay. Because I wasn't going that well. I reckon I probably wasn't a good defender of a world title. I probably got too wound up about it. I think, I didn't have any preliminary races on tour, which is probably a huge mistake. And I probably just got a bit stressed about the whole deal, and you got to have everything right, and didn't. So I wasn't anything like as good as I was the year before. However, earlier that year in Australia, I was going very, very well. Didn't carry that through to getting it right when it really counted. Yep.
Okay. So after '87, you in '88 you competed in the heavyweight men's quad in the Seoul Olympics. So did you head into that year with the intention, the idea of moving from lightweight to heavyweight, or how did that come about?
Oh, certainly. I mean, putting lightweights into the Olympic program in '96 wasn't even talked about it then, about that ever happening. So naturally, to want to go to the games was a thing that a lot of us would want to do. That I might say though that the lightweight competition as it was so phenomenally competitive and hard to win through all those years I rode it, that it didn't really matter that it wasn't Olympic at that time, because the events, the Lighty 4, the double, the single, the 8, are all so tough and hard to win, and great achievements for everyone that did that. But, you know, I'd rode for 10 years and I just sort of thought, well, I wouldn't mind having a crack at the Olympics. So I'd been rowing. We'd always rode heavyweight at home in the singles and the doubles and the 8s and what have you. Mm-hmm. So I knew I could compete with the pretty good handy blokes at home, the likes of the Awesome Foursome. So earlier that year in 88, I was rowing with the Awesome Foursome guys in the Victorian, which is our state, in the 8. It's called the King's Cup. We have it once a year. It's a very, very big domestic event. And I stroked that and we won that really, really well. And, so I had the opportunity to either go in the sweep program or the sculling program. I was predominantly a sculler. I'd been winning trials, single and heavyweight single at home, and also doubles for years and years with Paul Reedy, who's now one of the coaches in the GB program. But, it was a natural thing to want to do. And we got silver in 84 in the quad with Paul was in that with 3 other guys. So it was, that was the objective basically, to put my hand up to aim for selection in the heavyweights, and I got picked in the quad, and off we went. Yeah.
Wow. And I guess so. It's important for the audience when they listen to this to understand the context, like as you just shared, that lightweight rowing was not yet an event in the Olympics. So the only option for lightweight rowers was to make it into an open weight boat class to be able to compete at the Olympics.
That's right. There are quite a few lighties who'd done that, like Fernando Clement from Spain had won the silver medal in the pair in 84. To name one, and Jim Van Bellegem from Belgium, who won the 87 lightweight single. He was in the Belgium pair in 88. Bjarne Eltang, who I raced in 86 in the lighty single, he was in the Danish double at the 88 Olympics. They won their semi, very fast. And the Belgian pair in 88 came fourth, so very competitive. So the lightweights, there are a few lighties who'd been doing it up to that point. So, there was a number of lightweights who went on to have a crack at it, of course.
Yeah. And that was, it sounds like that was just the environment. That was the landscape of world rowing at that point in time. So at what point did the conversation kind of start shifting towards potentially having that in the future become a event or a class available in the Olympic Games? Was that in the early 1990s?
It must have been, I can't recall actually, to tell you the truth. It must have been around 92, 93, I reckon.
Okay.
I would think. Don't quite recall.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Okay, so take us through the Seoul Olympics, and then finishing out the 1980s and into the next quadrennium.
Yeah, well, we were a bit of a mixed bag put together in the quad. Richard Powell from Queensland, very good sculler. Brenton Terrell, who was from Adelaide, South Australia, very strong guy. Paul Reedy, who'd rode in the 84 quad. Paul was a very strong sculler. Very, very powerful guy. And I was the ex-lightweight. So we all sculled a bit differently. We all lived, Paul and I had rode together for a long time in double. It took a bit of blending, I'd be fair to say. We were pretty okay. We had we won at Henley Not a lot of competition, I guess. We rode in Holland, went okay, not the deepest competition of the field. Back in Australia, training before off to Seoul. So in the European tour, we hadn't made the final, Lucerne. I think we might have won the B final, actually, if I can recall. But, we had a bit to do to get anywhere near the medals, I think. We were really well coached by David Yates, who had been my coach when I won the lightweight world single sculling championship. But I just, we got to Seoul. We were okay. We had some pretty good competitors, from the Eastern Bloc countries, because the wall hadn't come down yet. So the Czechs were okay. The Poles were pretty good. Obviously, you had a very good East German program still going. You had the Soviets. Dutch sculling had always been strong. They were around. But the absolute class acts in the world of quad sculling was coming out of Norway. And, of course, Italy had incredibly strong sculling programs. And they were the Norwegians and the Italians were a cut above the rest of us. And we were okay, but not the class act and the power that those guys had. And in the semi, we were sort of lying fifth, third, fourth, fifth, third, fourth the whole way down, and managed to have a great row and came through and got the third place, got in the final. And we had an okay but average row in the final. And we got what our coach said we were sort of looking like we were going to get, fifth. We couldn't really do much about it to, get up against the Soviets and the East Germans to get the bronze.
Right. So after Seoul, you rode the men's double in 89 and 90, and then in 91 you rode the men's heavyweight single. It's kind of I've got some specific questions about 91, but tell us about 89 and 90 as well. Those 2 years at the World Championships in the double. Yeah,
I guess by then I'd started working in the finance sector. It was for ANZ Bank at that time, and I was starting to do a degree at night. And actually, my rowing got better because I was sort of more organised, I think. Still doing a lot of training, twice a day at least. And had been rowing with Paul Reedy from Melbourne Uni Boat Club for a long time in doubles. We won so many national champs, like I don't know the number, but we were pretty good. Even when I was rowing lightweight, we rowed with Paul, and it was a big, solid unit. So we were pretty dominant in the lighty double. And so coming off the Olympics the year before, where we'd again been winning the double through all the trials, we just wanted to have a crack in the double. And we got selected, which is good. And I was working, so we didn't have any lead up tours, lead up regattas, but I went to the Worlds in Bled in 89, and we were pretty competitive. I think we sort of led in the final through the middle of the race, but just couldn't quite hold it together against the great nations of Norway, who won it, Lars Bjonas and Rolf Thorsen, the Dutch, who'd won the gold in 88, and a very good Austrian crew that was on the up, Jonker and Zerbst. And so we came a pretty handy fourth. And so I was thinking, shit, we can, if things go well, we can win gold at some point, at some time, in heavyweight rowing, in sculling. you just have to get a lot of things right. So I could see that you can chip away and just accrue more skill, more endurance, more power, more experience. So it was really quite I suppose, an endorsement of belief, 89, by coming forth that we could actually do pretty well. Next year in 1990, whilst we had an absolute abysmal tour of Europe, the Worlds were very late in November, I think, October or November in Tasmania, Australia. And whilst we went rubbish in Europe, didn't make a final, I don't think, we were going pretty well and got quite a good bronze medal in 1990. And then, that was there was this 2-year sort of program to get to Barcelona and see if something could happen there.
Wow. Incredible. So why did you shift into the single in 91, the year before the Olympics? Was that by choice, or because that's the Olympic qualification year? So just looking at the results, you would think you'd stay in the double.
Yeah, well, Joe, there wasn't actually qualification then. It was open slat. It was open slather. As many crews as wanted to go could go. But if it was, it might have been a different decision. But I felt that I'd actually, like a couple of times in my rowing career, had a quantum leap improvement. Now that occurred in 85 in the single, and then it occurred again around sort of 1990, 1991 in the single. I was going a lot quicker. I was getting stronger. I was in my early 30s, I guess, 30, 31, 32 years of age. So I was getting just stronger and just a lot more endurance capability. We'd shifted our programming, our training, and I really flew on that. I really benefited significantly from a greater volume, less intense type program. And it enabled my rowing to change, my race profile to change, because of the nature of the work and how it really suited me and my age and all that sort of stuff. So I was going pretty good, and I felt I wouldn't mind giving the single a crack, simply.
That's awesome.
Just for a bit of a break. I was working full time and came to Europe, didn't do any racing, which was a bit of a learning curve to row your first heavyweight sculling race in the heat at the Worlds, because I was always very quick out of the blocks because I was light. And, 250 or 200 metres, I'd be well ahead. And then in another 10 strokes, I'll be last. Because that's when all the big guys got going. So we'd rowed trained at St. Moritz, but I hadn't had any racing. And it was a relatively short trip for us to come over, or me in particular. Other crews, because I was working, I sort of had to keep it short. And managed to navigate my way through the heat, through the rep, basically having to, claw my way over people to get through to the next rounds. In the semi, had Thomas Langer, I think Chalupa, and and Rolf Thorsen, who was the great Norwegian sculler. He was a 2-time world champion in the double and double Olympic silvers. He was in the heat, and basically I had to put my first major effort down 250 off the blocks to just stay anywhere near these guys, and managed to just row over the top of Rolf and beat him by 700ths to get the third spot in the semi and a berth in the final. So I got to the final, and I was pretty cooked by that race. It was a the guys who were really going well, they sort of cruised through the semis, but done about as much as I could ever do in that semi. And I was probably the gloss had come off a bit, and led the final at 500. I just sort of lost a lot of zing, I think, and I was sort of not a dynamic, lively middle thousand. I fell back into fifth, and then managed to row back through a bit. I rode back over the top of Eric Verdonk from New Zealand, who was bronze the next year. So I got a pretty good fourth. Would have loved a third though.
You mentioned in 85, like 86, and then again 90, 91. Two points or two time periods in your career, you made these quantum leaps in terms of your boat speed and kind of maturation of your rowing stroke. Is there something specifically you attribute that to? Like, was there a particular focus that you had at that time period, or training program, or a technical element, or what was it?
Oh, yeah, good question. That I'd say just lots of work over years, and lots of the right work. So shifting it from, when I started in the 70s, it was still a sort of fartlek, lots of flat out stuff in training. And then there's elements of shifting gears in terms of training profile, you could say, to more volume. So we did that in the 80s, but it was still pretty intense. It was still probably rating a bit high. Through the early 90s, we sort of backed it off completely to just low rate pull hard. And that made a massive difference to me. And it also at the times when I improved a lot, life things were probably more balanced, which you got to have.
Right. So it's not, I guess that's a fantastic point you just made. It's not just the training program. It's also everything else that's happening in an athlete's life at that time period too. Right.
Well, for me, it needed to be, getting other things sorted like work and career, and just get balance.
And you were training 2 sessions a day all the way through while you were going to school and then working, beginning your career in finance at this point.
Yeah, that's right. It's
how did you manage that?
Well, Melbourne's pretty easy living sort of city. We live pretty close to the boathouse, or the boathouses. It's a bit like Philadelphia, if anyone's been there. River's very user-friendly. It's always rowable. And it's, 1,000 metres from the central business district area. So that was where I was working. So it was quite easy. Getting around was easy. So not a lot of time wasted in travel, I guess. And then, of course, we always, whilst we're training hard and I was working, always still found time to go out and have a beer.
Nice. All right. So heading into 92, Barcelona Olympics. Tell us about that year and the lead up to that regatta.
Well, coming off 91, where I got the fourth, I realised and recognised that I wasn't going to get a gold medal in the single. I couldn't see that happening. And so, but however, to get it right in the double was imminently achievable. I wasn't sure how. I wasn't sure who with. And I was, had rowed with Paul, great mate of mine, but I was, very open-minded to rowing with anyone that could, really make a very, very fast double. And whether it was me or whether I was in a quad or another boat, but, so basically, I think the double is the boat where I felt the best opportunities lay. If you get a double right, it can go really, really well. If you get it not right, it can go really, really badly. I used to call it the doubles disease because you're seeing a lot of great doubles go through the ebbs and flows of their rowing careers, and it's all over the place. Even the great Norwegians and the great Dutch. That's everyone. It's hard to maintain great, consistent performance in the double. And it's different from the pair. If you ever look at the history of the pair versus the doubles can pull themselves apart and go slow. You've got two singles in a double, ultimately. And if you don't do it with great synchronicity, the boat goes very dead, whereas a pair will just twitch a bit. Pet theory of mine. But so, yeah, I thought the double's the boat to go for. I was open-minded to who it should be. There was lots of people vying to come into the program or into the sculling program. It was pretty deep, pretty good pool of athletes, and because it still wasn't lighties, we had a very good crop of tough lighties coming through who'd won worlds in the quad in 1990. So they saw a lot of those guys threw their hat into the ring, into the sculling squad, and Stephen Hawkins was one of those.
Awesome. And then, at what point did you two connect during that year and getting into the double? Like how many months out from the games?
May.
Oh, wow.
So he was
okay.
He was very fast through the trialing program in the single. He was quick. I won all the races at the national championship. He really pushed me. And then we were put together because I think we were quite ascendant as the two best scullers. And we had a pretty good double the year before. They won their semi but didn't row well in the final. They got sixth, but they'd won their semi. And they were tough. So the selectors said to Stephen and I, you guys row together for a week. And they put the 91 double together and we raced off. We had a race in May. Stephen and I won that pretty comfortably.
Wow.
In a pretty quick time in very, very cold water in Tassie. We did 6:12 on our first row, and I just knew we were on the money. Just got to say, Stephen Hawkins, toughest, best athlete I've ever rowed with or against.
Wow. Well, that's incredible praise coming from you. So I want to hear all about. Tell me about the regatta. I want to hear all the details from the heat all the way through the final, because this is, just epic. We are about to pick up part 2 with Peter Antonie. Just a quick reminder and segue. Peter just wrapped up and told us about the trials in Australia, and now he's going to tell us about the Olympic regatta in 1992 in Barcelona. Peter, welcome back.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So for those of us just tuning in, we wrapped up last week, and Peter will be kind of taking us into the lead up for the 92 Barcelona Olympics. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Peter.
Okay, Joe, thanks for that. Well, going back then, a long time ago, so memory's a bit sketchy, but Steve Hawkins and I were selected for the heavy double in 92 in May of that year. So we hadn't been rowing belong together at all. As you may or may not be aware, we'd both previously rode lightweights. Stephen had been world champion in the lightweight men's quadruple scull in 1990. Or 91 actually, sorry, and medalled in 1990. And I'd rode lightweights for 10 years, finishing in 87, and had rode in the Seoul Olympics in the men's quad. So coming into 92, I guess, I was looking for a partner that could team up in the double, because I felt the double was the best opportunity to actually go and win a gold medal at the Olympic Games. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't know whether it was realistic. But I'd been winning medals in the double with Paul Reedy in the heavy double for 2 years. So I sort of felt that the double was the boat that a win could be achieved in, and it so turned out through the season that Steve was the most competitive other sculler at 5'9" and low 70 kilos. Immensely powerful guy though, and the toughest racer I've ever seen or rode with. So we teamed up and won the national trials, selection trials for the Olympic team in May in Tassie. And if I recall rightly, we rode 6:12 in our first race ever to win quite comfortably, and were selected. So it was pretty quick in cold water at Lake Barrington in Tassie in May, which is our winter, or coming into our winter anyway. So we then trained in Tassie in Hobart. I sort of ceased working for a few months and trained on the Derwent River in Tassie. It's pretty cold down there, which I think is a good thing. Very long, straight river, so we could do a lot of the volume work we were doing. We did not do a lot of intensity at all, just a lot of low rate, pull hard sort of stuff, 18 strokes a minute with a lot of technical overlay, horrendous amount of technical overlay. And what I mean by that is, riding square blades or left square, then right square, and rotations around that, but all at the 18s to 20s, mostly 18, low rate pull hard for long distances. Stephen rode so bloody hard in that sort of work that his hands would be just getting shredded at that low rate intensity. So we accrued pretty good power and endurance, and doing that in the cold conditions is also pretty tough, and it's hard to get the heart rate, so you got to ride damned hard. So I think that set us in pretty good stead. I think in Tassie we did next to no intense work at all. It was all the low rate pull hard through May and June. I think we were done a sum total of 2 by 1,000 metre pieces in terms of anything at higher rate. So it was a much different program.
Wow.
With Coach Tim McLaren. We'd been coached by, or not coached, but led a couple of years earlier by others from overseas who had helped come in and reshape the Australian rowing methodology away from intensity down into low rate volume type work. Tim McLaren, our coach, who rode in the 1984 Olympic quad for silver, adopted that, and also adopted a lot of the training methodologies or technical overlays that came from Rusty Robertson, who was one of the genius coaches of the 20th century from New Zealand, who coached in Australia probably from 78 through 88, I guess. So Tim was a brilliant coach. And then off we went to Europe. I'm just trying to get the chronology right here, and I think we arrived into Lucerne for the big Lucerne International Regatta, which in those years was open to basically anyone that had been endorsed by their nations. So a lot of countries would have multiple entries. And that year at Lucerne Regatta was 39 doubles. A lot of them were from nations where they were vying for selection against other crews from their same countries. So a lot of German crews, as an example. We felt pretty good about ourselves, having rowed very quickly in trialling in Australia, and the training block had been really solid. And I knew that rowing with Stephen, we're going to have a phenomenal back half of the race. So from having been personally the big fast starter, lead early, always lead at 500, I'll never forget in the heat at Lucerne, I just said, I'm going to row light out of the blocks and see what happens, and relax in the knowledge of, one, we had a very good combination because we were both strong. We both had lots of endurance, and I think we were rowing technically very, very well under our coach, Tim McLaren. And so in each of our races, whether it was the heat, the semi, or the final, came out really gently and just eased our way into the race. Well, not really gently, but very patient and not putting too much power in at the front end of the stroke. And we had a very strong back end of the stroke with the way we were rowing, which was a very strong body and lever in the back half of the stroke. And consequently, we managed to be able to come through all crews in the back half of the race. Same story in the final. I think we were last or fifth at 500, working into the middle of the pack at 1,000. We had a little call there, and the power that came from Stephen was just freakish. And I think the boat just leapt out of the water, and we then hit second place in the third 500 with 500 to go against the Germans who hadn't been beaten all year. We got an overlap, but we'd come from a long way back, and we built our sprint from about 1,000, so a long way out. And I think we just fell off the edge of the momentum coming into the finish line. So we finished about a length down. But after having been so far back and coming home so strongly, I just had the most amazing feeling of confidence in that. In terms of the program was right, combination was right. We didn't have to do much different. We had the right power, the right technical expertise, the right coach. And so the next couple of months of prep was just about waiting for the final at the Olympics, whereby we would just come out quicker and not sprint from the 1,000, sprint from a little bit closer. So really encouraged by that, even though some opposition might have laughed at us because we're pretty small. I can tell you, it was Stephen's 5'9", but boy, it's very, very powerful. So that was Lucerne, and we rowed the Hollenbecker regatta, and then just into training camp.
So how much time was between Lucerne and the start of the Barcelona games?
Oh, look, I'm thinking we might have been in Europe all up 6 weeks, at a guess.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we had training. We probably went back into training for a week or so in Switzerland, and then back went to Holland for the Hollenbecker regatta. Mm-hmm. Rowed against the world champions who were the Dutch from 1991. Nico Rinks and Henk Jan Zwolle, massive guys, very, very skillful. Nico had also won the gold in 88. So we raced them in Amsterdam, and we won pretty nicely there. So that again just, I suppose, fueled the confidence to some degree that we could race on our terms, not having to blast out or whatever. We knew we had a very strong back end of the race. So rowing in Holland against the world champions, again, just added to the confidence levels, I think, before the final block of training back down in Switzerland.
Outstanding. And did you continue primarily with the same training program, just low rating, pulling hard, a lot of endurance work, or did you add in some speed work in the lead up to the Olympics?
I think, yes, we did add some stuff in there. I think we went to the Rotsy because we were training in Sem Park. On the Sem Park is a town called Cersei, which is pretty close to Lucerne. We went into Lucerne on one occasion and we did some step rate stuff across 2000, starting at 18, 20 to 22, 24, rolling it back again, starting at 20, stepping up 20, 22, 24. So we did that, and then I think we did 430 stroke pieces. That was the intense work we did, essentially. So we hadn't rowed together that long, even from selection in Australia, but there was just not a lot of need of intensity, and the work was done with load, and how fast can you make the boat go per stroke at low rate?
Right. Okay, so it sounds like heading into the beginning of the Olympic regatta, everything was going very well. You mentioned several times feeling very confident that everything was sort of trending in the right direction, good momentum. Everything was kind of aligning quite well. So take us through, the heat and into the semi and the final for the Olympic regatta.
Yeah, sure. The Olympic regatta was a town called Banyoles. It's quite some way out of Barcelona, but it was fantastically set up, and it's a beautiful lake, so it was idyllic with good conditions throughout the whole regatta. Pretty hot, which I was pretty happy about because I always like rowing in hot conditions, and I know some of the big fellas don't. So that was good. If I recall rightly, in the heat, we were well in arrears at 500 because I think it was might have been a Russian crew or ex-Soviet, because essentially the wall had come down, and the ex-Soviets were rowing for the independent states, ex-Soviet essentially. Some of the other nations had come out of the Soviet Union rowing in their own right, like Estonia. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it was the Russian crew led us by a long, long way at 500. They'd gone super hard and turned out to be very expensive, and they were back off the top of the pack very quickly, and we managed to, row to our pretty regimented race strategy, which was to start working at, I guess, 750 gone, and to lay down a bit of an effort at 1,000 and build it up from 750 in. We won the heat, as I recall, pretty comfortably. So that was all good and locking it away. We were exceptionally well prepared in terms of the mental prep side, where our coach Tim McLaren had taken us through some imagery relaxation type sessions, which I found pretty difficult early on, but it was extremely powerful later on, where we would, in those sessions, visualize sections of the race and then eventually the whole race. And so we were we're using that, and it was becoming very, very strong. Addition to everything else we had, I guess. So we got through the semi pretty comfortably. The Germans, who had not been beaten all year, who beat us in Lucerne, they were out of sorts. It just didn't look right. I heard the odd vibe that things weren't going well. I think one of them was not well anyway, didn't row from the semis onwards, and so they, as the threat, and I suppose the favourites, had fallen by the wayside, which is something you do see in doubles. It's a pretty volatile boat category because of the intensivity of having two single scullers rowing in a double. Sometimes the results can be quite volatile, and you can check that through results going back. But the Germans have been good all year. Whether it was illness or pressure. And one of those guys, Peter Antonie, was an ex-lighty. They were just not able to hold it together, unfortunately for them. In the final, we're really, I suppose, set for the best effort, if I could put it that way, that we could lay down in that race. Everything had been mapped out, designed, strategized to actually peak on that one occasion. And so we went harder early because we could at no expense. So we did. However, we still weren't leading at 500. The Spanish guys, who were pretty handy, led at 5. We're right on them, though. Our call at 500 was to not push the legs, which is bizarre. The call was to take it easy and just leave it through the second 5. 750 gone. A little call there to start pushing legs in the back half. We tucked up a lot, so we had a long leg push. 1,000, again, it was to feed the back end of the stroke. We had a lot of body swing going on, a lot of layback. It was differentiated style. First year of cleavers, which suited us a hell of a lot. We rode on a very hard gearing. We weren't big, but it was still pretty tough. And essentially we just hit the lead over the Dutch World Champions at 1,000. Austria starting to come into the hunt there, who were the World Champions from 1990. Round 750, we sort of lifted and started the sprint, essentially. I think we knew we could go that far out, and I think we knew we had to. And but having had a race profile that was quick early, but no cost, and then sort of conservative and measured through the early sections. We had a lot in the tank. And I don't know what the rates were, but it looks pretty high since I haven't seen it for years. But pushed well away off the Dutch and the Austrians, who were a couple of big, strong chaps, really good guys, came at us hard, and I think they just weren't able to do it. And I think they started to lose a bit of form, and we managed to surge on and kick the rate up a few times, and rode absolutely to the mapped out, visualized strategy that had been laid down. Every single stroke. It was like I was outside watching it. It's freakish. But it was a very intense race if you watch it from outside like you'd expect, and we won by half a length. I think I had a couple of strokes because the finish lines, the markers are quite broad on the course because it's on a lake. Had a chance to, out the corner of my eye, see the finish line before we got there, so it was a pretty good feeling for a couple of strokes to go. So it was by far and away the best row I ever had in terms of execution. Easily the best row I've ever had.
Amazing. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking us through the entire regatta and sharing that. That is outstanding. So, do you have anything else to add on the 92 Olympic regatta?
Oh, I should have retired then. But I loved the sport so much I kept going. And later that year I rode in the Armada Cup, which is a mass start race in Bern, Switzerland. All the big guns were there, and I won that, which was an absolute thrill. I think it was over 200 scullers on Are You Ready Go. It's absolute bedlam. Went back last year, actually. It's a phenomenally fun event. Then I sort of rode a few more world titles, not overly successfully, won a few more as Aussie champs, won Henley in the double, which was, again, one of the best fun races I've ever had. in those intervening years until full retirement. I went to Lander in the double. It just didn't work out. We didn't pair up as well as Stephen and I, obviously. Jason was injured, had a bad back. So that was unfortunate for him and us, I guess. And in 2000, I again was working, and in the intervening years between the games of 96, 2000, not essentially rowing in the team. I was just a bit too busy with work and study and all that sort of stuff. President of Melbourne Uni Boat Club. There's plenty going on. But did get selected again in the double with James Burton, and we were pretty okay. Went up to Amsterdam before the Olympic selection trial. I got food poisoned. Then I needed dental surgery from a bad dentist in Australia. Needed to get that fixed a couple of days before the qualifying regatta. We missed out by a foot. That was the end of the rowing career. Since then, I rode a fair few club races like Head of the Charles with club guys, and now I just scratch around in the Masters.
Very good.
That's rowing.
Very good. Okay, so we're gonna shift completely away from your racing career to sort of the current state of lightweight rowing, which is kind of up on the docket, so to speak, to be potentially removed altogether after the Tokyo 2020 games. And I found a recent kind of article on World Rowing where they talk about a lot of what's going on, sort of status quo across the sport. And so item number 15, lightweight rowing. So the council has made a preliminary decision to continue to study the future and position of lightweight rowing and world rowing, studying the entries at the international level and the national level, leading to discussion proposals at the 2020 Extraordinary Congress in October of 2020 in London, Great Britain. It was also decided that two options for the Olympic program of Paris 2024 need to be developed concurrently, one being the status quo of Tokyo, which is to maintain a lightweight men's double and lightweight women's double, and the other substituting coastal rowing for the two lightweight rowing events. Discussion during 2019 and 2020 will center on the IOC's position on rowing's events and competition categories, the quota reductions announced for 2024, and its decisions impacting the Olympic Games related to the Olympic agenda for 2020 and the IOC's quote-unquote new norm. So that is sort of the latest update that was published on 11th of February 2019. So my question for you is what are your thoughts on the current state of lightweight rowing, and if you were to sit down at the table with FISA and the IOC, what would you say to them about keeping it?
Well, I wouldn't sit down at the table with FISA because they're asleep at the wheel, and they've supervised the destruction of a hugely important and historically successful, highly competitive, attractive component of our sport, which I guess was lightweight rowing, still is. They've destroyed it essentially. Lightweight rowing wasn't created by FISA; it was created by national federations or bodies who had lightweight rowing anyway, and it rightfully was brought in to the World Champs program under the stewardship of Tommy Keller when he was the great president of FISA. And those lightweight events in those ensuing years were fantastically competitive, and hard to win and highly sought after, and great world championships, across the lighty eights, the fours, the singles and the doubles, etc. And so lighties were added to the Olympic program. As you know, there's a lot of the world's population that demographically or physically fit into that category. Any which way, lighties were put in the games, and that had its effect on the world's program, probably negative effect, and then to rip it back out off the gains it is just an absolute decimation, disgrace. And for FISA to say that they have to do what the IOC says, well, I think that's bullshit, because they don't. FISA can make a stand, but it's not strong enough, or it's biased and prejudiced by voting blocks and the like. So it is what it is, and I guess I'd like to see bodies created that are independent to FISA and to sponsor and grow rowing across the board, particularly lightweight. So that's my view. It's a disaster, really, but it is what it is, and things can be reconstituted, reinitiated, and the phoenix can rise from the ashes, I guess. But reflection needs to be had on how great those lightweight events were in the heyday, and to seek to, whether some folk can get together to rebuild it would be a great thing. I'm not too fussed anymore about what FISA and its biases have in terms of how they want to, push and pull and tweak the program to suit what they think the IOC wants. It'll be what it'll be. After having been sort of party to the more recent votes and what have you, it's cloak and dagger stuff, smoke and mirrors. So I just sort of watch it now. I'll be happy to create events that sponsor some lightweights to race outside the FISA and IOC system, though. I reckon that'd be great. That's my view.
Yeah, well, I very much appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your candor, and it's not over yet. So hopefully, this project that you're so graciously a part of gives fellow athletes such as yourself an opportunity to share their opinion and voice, and hopefully it shall be heard.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. If this content is important to you, please be sure to rate and review so more people can listen. Also, you may follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook to get weekly free content. For more in-depth content, please subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, leotraining.io. Be sure to check out the resources page to download free, helpful content. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me directly by email at joe@leotraining.io or via Instagram. The handle is @leotraining. Thank you again for listening, and have a great day.